Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this workshop. My name's Joe McBurney, and I'm going to be pressing the pedals today, showing you the new release of DDM. And this release is the first major release since the 2023.03 version that was clearly March 2023, so it's been a while. Okay. So you'll see here that the original description was releases between 2023.03 and 2024.07 because that's what we were aiming for, and all of the release videos I talk about 2024.07. We're actually going to cut the final public build on the 1st of October, so it will actually be a .10 build. So there are about 15 videos that go with this release, which highlight all of the major enhancements. There will be a release notes booklet that covers all of the enhancements, and I think there's a lot. If I just hop to the DDM website, like so, I think if you go to this new release matrix page on the DDM website, we can see here that the 07 release, or .10 as we're now calling it, there are 214 user-based enhancements. There are obviously a lot of bug fixes in there as well, and the icon at the end, the YouTube icon, will take you to the videos that relate to this public release, and there's approximately 15 of them. So if I do move a little bit too quickly today, you will be able to watch those videos at your leisure. Okay, right, so let's get into it. That's what YouTubers say, isn't it? Let's get into it, is what they say. Right, okay, so I'm just going to put my comments to the side here. Now, everybody should have had access to the Word document that is the booklet that we create. So this Word document is available for everybody, and we put each enhancement in its own little box, so that if you want to write your own comments in here, if something's of interest, if we don't have time today, you can always come back to us and we will walk you through them. But the idea behind the booklet that you have available to you is that you can scribble your own comments in here while listening, etc. I'm going to move this onto my other screen because that's going to be my guide to step through the enhancements. Okay, somebody start the clock. Let's go. So, the first enhancement is 10.0530 Administration. User create like inherits user profile UI, column and custom options. Now, what that means is, and a lot of people have asked for this over the years, if, for example, I'm going to log out as this user, okay, I'm going to log in as, don't know what that was, I'm going to log in as a different user. So I'm going to log in as sample.user. Now, you're probably all familiar with the fact that you can change column layouts in the various screens. You can just decide which columns to turn on and off. You've also got options that can be turned on and off in the tools options, etc. Now, what you can now do is you can set columns. If I turn certain columns on, so let's say latest issue and the recommended attribute. These are the ones I use by default. Okay, so I'm going to put recommended before state, latest issue after issue, and category before recommended. So this is my typical layout when I'm looking at items in the database. The other thing I'm going to set is against an open change order. So I'm going to open a change order folder. And we can see in the content here, we have folder link attributes. So I've got some extra ones that I've configured called order action, order quantity, and it can be any of these attributes. It's not restricted to link attributes. Stock quantity, stock action, order quantity, order action, and notes. Okay, we've already got notes turned on. So I've switched these extra columns on. So this can be for any of the item types. and I'm going to exit this folder. When you save and exit out of DDM, that's when it keeps a record of your layout and your options. It saves them back to the server against your user account as you exit DDM. What we can now do is, I'm actually going to, let me just log back in as this user so I can open the administration tool. Okay, tools, admin, log in, and I'll come back out as sample user. Okay. So in the administration tool, what I can now do for sample user, you can now copy the UI profile settings. So any of your options and screen layouts can now be copied from one user. You could either copy it, I'm going to copy it to Dave Wright here and say paste UI profile. Yes. What you can also do is you can copy straight to a group if you want to as well. So it allows you to configure the layout of DDM screens, save that as a profile, and then apply it to other users or groups. Okay, I've only applied it to Dave Wright, so if I quickly log back into as david.wright, okay, if I go to my recent items, so recent items, and we can see in here, he has exactly the same columns laid out on the screen. And if I open a change order, we should have exactly the same columns turned on inside this folder contents. So I'm going to exit as that user. So in the book under administration, the first enhancement 10.530 is the ability to basically keep all of these settings. If you create a user as a similar from that user, so there's two enhancements here. One is copying and pasting the UI settings, and the other one is the ability to create a similar user that will inherit all of those settings as well. So very useful, so you can standardize on people's screens. If we go to the EUM section, the third enhancement, which is DDMC 10004, would like a tool to convert XML to CSV. Now, if you have DDM configured to map or transfer your data from DDM to an ERP system, for example, okay, if I just log in as me. So when we release an item, or you can manually send an information to enterprise. So if you are sending stuff to your ERP system, the default format that we use for that is an XML format. So if I look at my recent files, if I was releasing a part by changing the status or manually sending it to enterprise, what happens is I'm going to go to my DDM server. This is my server machine, and in the file system on my server machine, we have a default output folder, and we can see in here that the format for the files is an XML format. So XML is an ASCII-based sort of industry standard format. If I open this part here, we can see all of the attributes available for this part to be able to send to or import it into an ERP system. Now, people often require CSV format, not XML. What we've included now in the admin tool, if I go to System, Enterprise, Export, XML Output Formatting Tool. So, if I launch this tool, what we can now do for parts, assemblies, drawings, and documents, I'm just going to pick on parts. We want columns to output. I can go into here now and I can choose what columns I want in my CSV file. So I can remove the create date. I've got some custom parameters here for ROS compliance. So I want this one. I want to add this one, and this one, and this one. So I've added my ROS compliant attributes in here. I'm going to say OK, and I can set this running, so this will monitor the XML folder, and every time a new file appears it will convert it to CSV and leave me with a CSV file. So if I set this running now, like this, if I go back into this folder, you'll see that all of the XML files have been removed. We've got output files here that now contains all of my CSV files. So if I go into one of these CSV files, what we will see in here in the columns are the attributes in the order that I wanted them to appear. So a really nice, neat tool if you need to auto-convert XML into CSV format. Okay, if you're integrating DDM with other databases. So, let me minimize that and get back to DDM. The next topic is watermarks. Okay, the first enhancement is 10.552 watermarks. Would like the ability to decide which pages of a PDF have a watermark applied. Now, I've got a document inside DDM that I'm going to use for the first example because so I've got a document here which is just a default Word template. Now I'm using a document because the ability to apply watermarks only on certain pages is typically more associated with a document where you might have a header page or an index page, etc. Not so common with drawings. Now, if I just right click and preview, I'm going to open the PDF of this document so we can see what we have here. Now, as you can see, I've got several watermarks on the screen. I've got one up the left hand side, which is a text-based watermark telling me if anybody exports the file, who did it, and the day and the date. The new enhancement is the ability to apply a watermark. This is the one I've applied, and it only appears on the first page, not subsequent pages. Okay, we can also see that we've got an image on the screen here, and the demonstration here is the ability to apply opacity to the watermarks as well. So there's two enhancements. One is the ability to control the page that the watermark appears on, and the second one is to control the opacity of either the image or the text. Let's look at how we do that. We go back into the admin tool under System, Watermarks. I've got watermarks for documents here. Now, this document that I'm looking at is released. So let's have a look at the released watermarks. I've got an image that's been applied here, and we can see down here on the screen that we can control the opacity of that image. Now, I'm going to clear that so it goes back to normal opacity. If we go to our watermark text, this watermark, where I've just literally typed in, this is the page number, I'm going to say this is the first page only. Okay, so I'm going to change the text, and let's just make it blue so we can see what we're doing. We can change the opacity of that. So let's say we only want that at 25% opacity. So that's a new enhancement. And if I now accept that change, you'll see here, select pages. If I clear that, you choose your pages with comma separators. Now I only want this on page 1. So I've changed a number of things. I've changed the text, I've changed the colour, I've set the opacity of the text to 25, and I only want it to appear on page 1. And I've also modified the image so it goes back to full opacity. Let's go back and relook at our document. If I open it in a larger screen so we can see clearly, I've removed the image completely, not sure. Oh, I know, because I've set it to 0. Okay, so here is our new text. Okay, and it's only on the first page. This is the first page only. And I've clearly done that wrong, so let's go back and have a look. And I believe I should have set that to 100. And in here, blue, 25. That's correct. If I set that to 100, it goes back to dark blue. If I do that, the image it should have come back. So I go back to here, I preview, Sorry, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. I'm going to preview this image. And now what we have is, we now have our image has come back 100% and our text is also 100%. So if I only now change the text, what we will see is the image through the text. I'm going to set this down to 20%. Okay, come back. And if I now select to here, open it in a big window, what we now have is we can see the image through the text. Okay, so two really good enhancements for watermarks. The one setting the opacity of the text is very useful on drawings. If you've got a drawing work in progress and you want to put a comment right across the middle of the drawing, you can still see the technical content of the drawing behind the text, and we couldn't do that previously. So two really nice enhancements for watermarks. Okay, searching next. DDMC 9894 searching. Would like display filters latest issue checkbox. What does that mean? Well, you will be familiar with the fact that previous versions, if I'm looking up in this top right hand corner of my screen, we had a button here like this one for latest issue only. We've started to extend this, so we've actually added a display filters button here, and this is where you set the latest issue. If I turn that off and rerun my search, we can see probably in here that we've got items that are not the latest issue. Okay, so that option was previously a button on the screen, so it's just been moved. If you're looking for it, we now have display filters. The next enhancement is an option for collapse or expand all. Again, we've been asked for this a number of times. If you're working on a structure and you want to see the whole structure, what I'm going to do here is search specifically on assemblies. Okay, and I'm looking for this assembly. It just so happens to be SolidWorks. It doesn't matter what the assembly or the file type is. We now have an option for expand all and collapse all. To demonstrate this, I'm going to minimize the side window on the left, and I'm going to put my embedded properties over on the right. If I say expand all, it's going to open this structure through all parts, assemblies, drawings and documents, so I can see my entire structure. Now, that's really good. However, the were used and the attachments nodes clearly cloud the view of this. So the next enhancement on our list, which is 9893, is the ability to filter these two nodes on and off. So again, if we go to our display filters, we can now turn off the were used and the attachments nodes, and therefore we are only now looking at the structure that we're interested in. And the expand all will always expand or collapse from the point that you issue that particular command. So if I from here say collapse all, it will collapse and expand from that point. Okay, very useful. The next enhancement, which is 9884, is the ability to filter within our search results. Now this applies all over the database. Okay, at the top of my screen above my search criteria, I have a new box here called filter. It will only filter based on the results that I have on the screen, and only based on the columns that are switched on, because it's filtering on the text in the window. Now, so if I, for example, I'm looking through this whole structure and I'm interested in Vichy, all I'm doing is typing VIS and it starts to filter down because it's found these on the screen. So very fast way of filtering within search results. It will not change the search. And if you want it to filter in more columns, you have to turn those columns on. You will notice here that there's nothing with Vichy at this level or this level, but if you're looking in a structure, it will always show you the results within the context of the structure. So it's showing these two parent nodes here. So a really nice way of filtering results very quickly on the screen within your search results. Okay, the next enhancement is 9884, which is would like to be able to filter within search results. That's what I've just shown you. Yeah, okay, and then 11351, in the embedded properties window, we'd like to be able to filter the structure and where used tabs. So I'm going to stick with the same assembly, okay, and let me just say collapse all. So this assembly, I'll bring my embedded properties back, and within the structure tab and the where used tabs, okay, I've also got this filtering capability. So I can do the filtering within the context of the embedded properties. So for example, if I'm just looking for M6, I just type M6 and it's filtered everything out. So really neat, quick and easy way of seeing the wood for the trees. Okay, we also have the display filters in here as well. So you can turn certain types of information on or off. If I wasn't interested in seeing any related documents, I can filter them off in my view. So, you know, have a look at and experiment with these, the filters and the display filters, very useful. Okay, the next option is embedded properties. So this is 8376. Embedded properties would like folder filter options for the structure tab. Okay, if I go to a particular folder, I'm going to use an NPD project as my example. Let me just copy that, and I'm going to search across, well, we'll just search everything. Okay, I'm going to search for this NPD project. If I look at the project, within the structure tab on this project, I've also got the same filter. Now I'm going to just drag this up so we can see. In my project, I use lots of dividers, and your dividers contain all the files. Okay, if you just want to say only show me the files, we could say turn the dividers off. So, you know, when you're working with folders and you've got lots of sub-levels and dividers and lots of information in there, it's very convenient to be able to turn certain things on and off to quickly find what you're looking for. Okay, so again, the embedded filter and display filters within the embedded properties for a folder. Likewise, if I open the folder, I've got the same options inside the folder where I can turn certain things on and off. And if I say remove parts, then we're only looking at assemblies, etc. So these filters can be all turned on and off. I'm going to close this out. Okay. The next enhancement is the Reserve Reference Manager and the ability to be able to filter within the Reserve Reference window. I'm going to use the example of there's an assembly here that was supplied by a friendly customer. Not that you're not all friendly. If I go to assemblies here and I say search for this assembly. Now this assembly here, if I wanted to reference this or reserve this assembly, I'm going to pick reference, okay, because I'm not actually going to put it in there. Now I've got 1135 of my folders have appeared in this window. I could narrow it down to the pinned folders, the ones I'm focused on, but you know, if you have a lot of folders in this window, again, we've got this filtering capability. Okay, so if I was looking for the word rock, I can very quickly filter that down using this filtering capability. Again, just a very quick and easy way to find what you're looking for. The next enhancement, which is 10512, in here is the ability to the default focus. So at the end of this filter field here, you can say, I want this to be the default focus. So if I'm in here and I say reserve to something, my cursor is already in that field, so I can just start typing. I don't have to click my mouse in there first. So it just changes the filter focus onto here as opposed to being on the OK button. gives you the option of working in both ways by default. Okay, so checkbox filter for default filter. So next we're going to go for workflow. For anybody who's attended the periodic review workshop, I demonstrated this next feature on that. I've got some a new folder type in my database for periodic reviews. So when I say periodic review, it might be machine maintenance, instrument calibration, compliance renewal, certificate renewals, etc. Now, I'm going to use the example of this micrometer. So if I look at my workflow, this is currently under review. Okay, and this is my workflow for periodic review. It's under review at the moment. Okay, now I've got some attributes here. One is an active expiry date, the amount of time I allow for the review to happen, and I've only got 1 minute here, so we don't have to wait too long to do the demonstration. Normally you would put, we will allow 1 week for the review, or 1 month for the review, or 3 months, etc. And the ability to reset the review date. Now, if I edit this folder, I'm going to say that the expiry date for this is at 14, so it's today at 14:34. Okay, and I'm allowing 1 minute for the review. So if I just say OK and close, and if I send that forward to say I finished the review, what will happen here is the system has automatically set the review date to today at 14:33 because my expiry is 14:34 and I'm allowing 1 minute. So it's at my expiry minus 1 minute. Okay. So again, you would typically review things every 6 months or every year. If it's an annual review, you might allow 1 month for that review period. Okay, so how do we do this updating of these attributes? Let's take a look in the background. If I go to the administration tool, under the workflow now, we've added the ability to execute an SQL function as part of the workflow. I have a periodic review workflow, and when we go to the active step, I can have an advanced option now. Now, some of you will be familiar that you can automatically trigger the creation of a new action at a step in a workflow. The new enhancement here is to run an SQL on arrival at step. The example that I've already got in here is, so I've given it a name, and that's the actual SQL script. So I'm updating the periodic review folder. I'm setting the review date. If I've allowed 1 minute for the review, then I'm taking 1 minute away from the expiry date and setting that attribute. Okay. If I cancel that, cancel OK. If we go back to DDM, what we also do here is if I go back to my workflow, you see that if I refresh the screen, let me just open this. The workflow is timed out. It's gone back to the review step in the workflow. And what we've also done is we've cleared the expiry date so that the user can't accidentally send it forward in the workflow without resetting that date, because I have another rule here that says you must reset the expiry date before you send forward. That's also an SQL function. If we look in the background, again, periodic review. When we go to under review, under the advanced tab, I've got an SQL script that just clears that attribute. So the enhancement is the ability to execute an SQL script when arriving at a step in a workflow. You could use it for things like, you might create a new attribute that says, when was the folder closed? So rather than looking in the audit trail, you could populate an attribute that says when did it actually closed, so that it's a column that you can search on in the database. This enhancement opens up any number of possibilities within the workflow. It's super powerful. When you apply your SQL script, you have to accept liability. It's very, very powerful, which means it's very, very dangerous, because if you put an SQL script in there that says go and clear the whole database, that's not good. So we've allowed this to happen, but you have to be accountable for your own actions. Okay, so a great enhancement, just be a bit cautious. Okay, so the next enhancement, bulk editor, which is 9861. We introduced the bulk item editor in the 2023.03 release of DDM. And I'm going to look in here that I'm going to open a bill of materials. So the first enhancement, which is the 9861, is the ability to access the bulk editor in other areas of the database. If I, for example, just look at my recent items, the bulk item editor allows us to modify attributes en masse. So I could choose these items here and I can edit them all at the same time. So for anybody who's not seen the bulk item editor, you have to be in a special system group. Let me just return to the new DDM admin tool. Okay, in groups, when you go to a 2024 revision, you will see that we now have power groups. So we've renamed some of the default groups and called them power groups. One of them is a bulk item editor. So we restrict it and you decide who's allowed to use this tool or not. I can multi-select items, go to bulk edit, because I might be changing the supplier, and I could change that attribute to all of them in one go. I can also change multiple attributes all at the same time in a single action. And I could say OK. So I've updated 3 items in one go, regardless of ownership. So very, very powerful. The new enhancement is the ability to access the bulk editor from other windows within the database. If I go into an assembly, if I'm working on an assembly in the bill of materials window, I can invoke the bulk editor from this window. So previously you could only access the bulk editor from the main search results, and we think, well, if you're allowed to use it, why can't you use it anywhere? So that's this first enhancement. The next enhancement is the bulk editor would like setting of refresh parameters attribute to yes if the updated attribute is mapped to CAD. So for those who are familiar, we have the ability in the DDM administration tool to map the parameters between your CAD application and the DDM database. Okay, now I'll pick on SolidWorks as the example. Is that what I'm going to pick on? Hold on a minute. Let me just find the file I'm going to. Yes, it is. So I'm going to search for 20377. So the part I'm interested in here, I should search specifically on the number so I get fewer results. If I search here now for that, okay, this part, if I update one of the parameters that is mapped, so the description is mapped with CAD, the issue is mapped with CAD. If you edit the description in DDM, that means when you load the file into CAD, that attribute must update itself, and therefore the CAD file needs to be resaved back so that they are both up to date. So there's an attribute called parameter refresh. Now we will only set the parameter refresh flag if it's a parameter that is mapped in the CAD parameter mapping. Previously, it set that refresh flag on every attribute change. Okay, so it will now only do that if you have it as a mapped parameter. To demonstrate, if I update the description on this part, here I've said test. Now, let me just turn on the parameter refresh attribute. It's already turned on, and over here somewhere it says no. So I'm going to move it so we can see it here. Parameter refresh no. That means DDM and the CAD file are both up to date with that attribute. If I change this and change the text to Joe, the parameter refresh flag is now yes. You'll also notice that I've color coded here to say if that attribute is yes, highlight it to the user. Let's be careful. Okay. If I was to update, so I'm going to now clear. Well, if I launch this file, it's warning me in the load window that the parameter refresh needs to be updated. So I load it. We will open it into the CAD application. In this case, it's SolidWorks. Right. Thank you, SolidWorks. So we're going to open this into SolidWorks now. Here's my file that's been opened into SolidWorks. Okay. And if I do a save to DDM, it will warn me that this file needs to be saved. Okay. Sorry, just to show you that. Let me just load it and say yes. Okay. If I do a save now, DDM save, it will know that it needs to, a save is required. So it's telling me that this needs to be saved. If I save it to DDM, we're going to update the information, and we'll talk about this progress window in a minute because it's another new enhancement. So you're getting to see this before we've had a chance to explain it. So I've now updated that in CAD. I'll clear my working folder and go back to DDM. If I refresh my screen, the parameter refresh flag has now been cleared. If I modify a different attribute, let's say the recommended attribute, and say this is no longer a recommended item, recommended is not mapped to CAD, and therefore if I open this in CAD, I get no warning. I will get a warning to say that it's not a recommended item. Okay, that's fine, I know that. When I load it in here, if this was in the context of assembly, it does not need to save this part. So, intelligent use of the bulk item editor so that it will only set the parameter refresh flag to yes if it's a mapped parameter with CAD. Okay, next is, okay, if you have items in your database where the CAD parameter refresh has been set and you're happy that that attribute is not correct, if I go to my advanced search and say where the parameter refresh, or sorry, refresh parameter is equal to yes. So I'm just going to run an open search because there will be things in my database. Now, these items here are flagged for update. Okay. And if we just have a look here, so what I can do is if I'm happy that these do not need to be updated, I can bulk edit those now, and I can change the refresh parameter, say, no, that's not required. There's some warnings. You need to understand what the warnings are, so have a read of that. We don't have too much time today. It needs a password because you're using a power tool, and I've now cleared that parameter, so it will say no. So if you have things in your database and the parameter refresh flag is set to yes, and you deem that that's not correct, then the bulk item editor can now help you modify all of those en masse rather than having to do them one at a time. Okay, the next one. So this enhancement is 9569. Would like setting of issue, latest issue attribute. Well, it's the issue attribute, sorry. So I could say, well, all of these are set to import at the moment because that was my default when I imported the data. I could choose all of these, use the bulk editor, And if I know that all of these are actually issue A.12 or whatever, I can then modify those items all at the same time. So the ability to set the issue against an item or update the issue against an item. Okay. The next attribute is we have an attribute called is it the latest issue? I'm going to go back to my free search here and search for this item. We're currently got 82 issues of this item. If I say show me all issues, what we now have is every issue of this item from 1 all the way to 82. 82 is the latest issue. Now, we've had lots of scenarios where people have created a new issue, but it's an old issue. They've added something to their database that is not the latest issue, and because they've added it manually, you can have 2 items that are showing as the latest issue. So there are scenarios where you can make a bit of a mess depending on how you're using it. What we now have the ability to do is, and let's just say purely for demonstration's sake because it's not correct, but if I wanted to set 79 as the latest issue, we can do this with the bulk editor. If I say L for latest issue, is this the latest issue? Yes. Because it's a released item, I need, so again, this is going to warn me that all other issues will be set to not the latest issue. So what we now have is 79 is the latest issue, 82 is not the latest issue. So if I go back to my display filters and say only show me latest issue, I'm now seeing 79. So if you come across situations in your database where something is incorrectly showing as the latest issue, you now have the ability as a bulk item editor to update that information. I'm going to set it back because in my database that's clearly wrong. So I'm going to reset this one back to the latest issue. Yes, it is. Okay. And 79 is no longer the latest issue. So that is DDMC 10528, the bulk item editor, to be able to set the latest issue flag between yes and no. We also had the ability to change the issue of an item and also to reset the refresh parameter flag and the intelligence in order to not set the refresh parameter if it isn't an attribute that's mapped in the CAD parameter mapping tool. So, onto the DDM web client. DDMC 9875, I can't demonstrate this, I can only explain it. Let me just close this out and go into the web client. Now, I'm running a 2024 version of DDM. So in the top left-hand corner, I can see the revision of DDM. If you are running a DDM 2024 version, then any CAD license or Office license that is not being used can be used as a web client. So we've introduced a single user floating concurrent web read-write license. Previously, you had to buy the unlimited read-only, which was a lot more expensive. So we're phasing out that license and obsoleting it. And we now have single user floating concurrent web read-write licenses. So that's one change. What we've added to that is to increase the value is that any CAD or Office license not being utilized can use DDM Web. So that means from 2024 onwards, every single DDM customer has access to the web client. Okay, if anybody is not familiar with the web client or not using it and they like more information, contact your sales guy and we'll arrange to show you what it's all about. Okay, but we've added value and we've introduced a new tool in the process. Okay, The next enhancement with the DDM web client is DDMC 6611, sorry, is a web client dashboard, custom widgets. We've given you the ability to customize the web interface dashboard. I'm going to log in as myself, and this is the default dashboard. These options that you get in DDM are the same options that you get inside here under your favorites. So if you want to browse the category browser, you can. If you want to look at your folders or your actions or your recent items. So these favorites in the navigation on the DDM Office client are the same as the ones that you get in the web environment. So recent files, I get to see the files that I've been working on most recently. The enhancement here is the ability to customize this dashboard. So I want to go into edit mode, edit dashboard, or dashboard, edit the dashboard. I've got a button here and we've made it shocking yellow so it stands out. At the moment we've got three groups: general, actions and folders. I want to add a new group in here, and I'm going to call this my KPIs, for example. Call it anything you want. Okay, I've got a new group at the bottom down here, and actually I want that group to be moved up the tree. Okay, because that's the one I'm interested in the most. So I'm starting to change the layout of this. What I want to add to this group is a new widget. So I can add a widget. What type of widget do I want? Well, we've got all of the default widgets in here. We can also access your favorites, which are your saved searches. We can have custom widgets, and we can also add category browser straight to the top level. I'm going to start by adding some favorites, because I've got a saved search for my quality procedures to show me how many audits are still open. So I want my audits search, and I want a row count, not an icon. So I now have a widget telling me how many audits are open in the system. I'm going to add another one. Again, one of my favorites. And I'm going to say how many open corrective actions. Let's have a row count, add. Let me add another one, add a widget. So these favorites are all about data coming from the DDM database. So these are all queries on the local database. What we've also allowed you to do, let me just finish this off here. So these are my quality procedures, and I want to be able to see row count, add. I'm going to save this as my custom dashboard. Okay, I now have a new dashboard, and when I save it, it runs the query. So I've got 5 audits, 5 corrective actions, 5 change orders, and 2 NCRs that are open. Okay, so it's really nice. It's a visual dashboard. If I go back into edit mode, I've added some other custom widgets. Well, in fact, let me come out of here. If I go to my category browser, if I'm looking for certain things on a regular basis, let's just say templates for Office document templates, there's a mini burger bar here, and I can add any of my categories to the dashboard. I'm going to call it templates. Let's just say I'll call it templates. I want it on my custom dashboard, and I want it to be in my KPIs. I mean, it doesn't make sense to put it there, but I've now added a specific icon here. If I go into edit mode, I might not want to use that icon. I can edit the widget, and I can put another icon. Okay, I've got some sample data in here. Let me have a think. Where do I put it? I put it in here. Let me just go into icon experience. Let's say we'll have a 48 pixel icon, and let's say it's a document note. That icon's not going to be big enough. Let's pick a nice big one. And let's say document, well, it doesn't matter which icon we use. Let me just use this one here. Okay, I want to use this icon. Did I select it correctly? I'm not sure I did. Yes, I did. So now I've changed the icon on this dashboard widget as well. Let me save that away. Okay. What I could also do is, I don't know if you're familiar, you can create folders in the web client as well. So if somebody wanted to raise a new change order in the web client, you can. Okay, well, if that's a little bit buried, again, I could go into edit mode and I could add a widget. I'm just going to add it into this group here. And that is create a new folder. And what type of folder do I want? Raise a change request. I'm going to give it an icon. And let's say we'll just give it an apple for now. Okay, we do that and we say OK. And I save my dashboard. And I'm going to save it to my custom dashboard. So rather than having to click into this to find out what folders, I can say raise new change request. There's one more widget type that we can do here, so I'll do that before explaining any more. As an administrator, we've given you the ability to build your own custom web widgets. I've got 3 examples in here. The 3 examples that I've added is you say create widget, give it a name. Is it an active widget? Do you want a row count query and a results query? Okay, so the row count query, this is the SQL query, but you'll notice this is not a query on the DDM database. This is a query on a third-party database. So we can display information on the DDM dashboard that is coming from other databases. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that and I'll go back into edit mode. And yeah, let's go into edit mode once more and we'll say add group. This time we'll call it support calls. I've added a new group. I'm going to add a new widget. Okay, it's a custom widget. And I want one showing me how many open support calls there are. I can also add a widget because I've got 3 options in here. How many have we opened today and how many have we closed today? Custom widget. Okay, let's save that away. So we have a total of 48 open support calls across all customers. And this is getting this information from our support call database, not from DDM. We've opened 10 new calls today and we've closed 12 calls today. So really useful to be able to get information from other data sources. Now, you might not want this data available to all users. So what you can do against this is when you define your custom widget as the administrator, you can specify which group that widget is available to. Because if it's sensitive information, you don't want everybody to see it. So the ability to customize the web dashboard, and bearing in mind if you've got your web configured on the open internet as well, that means that you can get all of your dashboard statistics straight to your mobile phone or cell phone, whatever you call it in your country. Okay, so I think it's a really good enhancement, and clearly you'll probably come up with your own ideas as to how and why that would be useful. That information can be saved against your profile, and therefore you can set the custom dashboard for different users. So you can say, right, I want all these users to see the same dashboard so that we don't all have to create it manually ourselves. Okay. So, web custom widgets. The next enhancement for the web client is the ability to up-issue items. So this is enhancement 4452. If I look at my recent list, have I got any documents in here? Let's look at this document here. So I'm looking at a document here and it's a released document. Okay, I can load it and look at it. What I want to do is I want to up issue the document. It's currently issue 2. When I choose to up issue the document, I can set the next issue. I want to save this. I'm just going to save it to my workbench. So I'm reserving the new version to my workbench. If it was a change order, it would put the change order number in. So I'm going to give it a change number, and let's say added new company logo, whatever the change is, and we can then up issue that document. So we've now created a new issue of that document. We're now working on issue 3 and it's work in progress. We have the ability, because this is web based, we have the ability to download the native file to our computer. We can edit the native file, and then you can upload a new version of the file. So we can't automatically launch it and save it back into the web client, but we can export the file, update the file, and then reattach the modified file. So the ability to up issue items, documents, parts, assemblies, and drawings inside the DDM web client. The next enhancement, which is DDMC 9200, is the ability to change the status of the item. So I've not attached a new file. I don't need to go through that, but I can select the status and say, I'm setting this to checked. All good. So I can change the status in the web client. This has now been checked. It's all subject to your normal access controls. I then want to set this to released, finished. Add a comment, and I've now released my document. So the ability to up issue items inside the web client and the ability to change the status of an item in the web client. The next enhancement is related to SolidWorks, and it's the addition of a new single save window. We've talked about this for many years. Creo has always had a single save window option. Okay, we now have one for SolidWorks. We now have one for SolidEdge. We're in the process of doing one for IronCAD. Then we're going to do Inventor, and then we're going to rewrite the Creo one in line with the changes that we've introduced for all of the other ones. So ultimately, what I'm about to show you in the SolidWorks single save window environment, in terms of loading and saving your data and clearing the working folder, will ultimately apply to all of the supported CAD applications. So there are minor changes to the Creo one because we've changed a couple of things to make them more visual and easier, and there's a brand new one for SolidWorks and a brand new one for SolidEdge. Okay, let's take a look at the single save window for SolidWorks. I've got an assembly that I've been given from a friendly customer. Let's go in and look at this particular assembly. So I'm going to load this assembly. Now the first thing is, I don't have to have SolidWorks open. I don't have to go to SolidWorks and say search and open. Okay, I'm just inside DDM, and I can just double click on the file and it will open it in a new load window. So for SolidWorks users, this is a new load window, and if there are any warnings in here, it will highlight them for you. Okay. We have a third column here that says local file status. There are no files locally. Okay. We can also close this window immediately after the load has finished. Now I'm going to cancel that. In order to demonstrate, I'm going to clear the local cache on my local computer, which means that my computer has never had these files loaded onto this particular machine. When I load my assembly, there is nothing in the cache, and I'm selecting 26 megabytes of files. There are 31 files. Now, previously in DDM, it would load each file across the network one at a time. So if you're working on a slow network from home or via VPN, then it would be a lot slower. What we now do is we batch the files. So because there are only 31 files, we've batched the files into a single file, we've compressed the batch, and then we bring it from the server. So instead of hitting the network 31 times, we're hitting the network once, and because we're compressing the batch, we're reducing the amount of data that you're bringing from the server, which makes it considerably quicker when you're loading. Okay, now, that was the first load. What I should have done, if I clear my working folder, and again, we'll come back to this in a minute, I'm going to clear the cache again. And this time, when I load, I'm going to say don't close the window after load. So it's bringing down a single batch. If there's 1,000 files, there might be 10 or 15 batches because there's an optimum size. This load took 5.6 seconds the first time I load it. If I close this now, because it's been cached, even if I clear my local working folder, this time when I open it, it's only taken 4.4 seconds because the DDM time, the file server download, took 0.05 of a second because it's cached locally. So we've made the loading quicker through batching and compressing, and we've optimized the speed of the caching facility. So loading your assemblies will be considerably quicker. Okay. The next thing is saving. If I'm working on an assembly, now I'm not going to modify anything, but if I was working on this assembly, we've reduced the number of save options available on the DDM menu. There's a save copy as, and that is to save the current item into the database under a different number, but leave me with the original in session. It's a very specific kind of save. You've also got saving for configurations. The only other save option is a single save option. If I select the single save option, we analyze the files that you've got in your session. This window will show me all of the files in the structure based on the active window within CAD. So we're seeing the save relative to the structure that we're looking at. It's much clearer for the user to understand what's going on. Now, the only reason it's saying save the top level is because I'm forcing a save on it. It's also saying that it's going to overwrite the drawing because I have an option here that says include drawing. Because if you change an assembly or a part, that typically means the drawing has changed as well. So you do have the option of saying, if you're changing a part or assembly, force the save on a drawing. Okay, so I typically leave this on. It's your choice. Now, when you're working on a design, you might update a number of items. So if I just simulate that, what would happen here is these would say save required, and I'm choosing to overwrite the files. If they were released files, it would tell me that the save is required, but you can't overwrite them. You must either save them as something new or save a new issue of the file. So very visual, so that the designer can say, I want to save, and then it will say, well, these are all of the things that you need to make a decision on, and we're seeing everything in the context of what we're working on. Okay, now, another option here is, well, on the top right-hand corner, I've got the ability to say, generate mass properties or not. Now, we've been asking lots of customers, do you use the mass properties? And nearly everybody says, we don't use them, and if we want it, we load into CAD, have a look at the mass properties, and then we take that figure. The mass properties takes a large percentage of the save time to generate that information. So you now have the option to turn that on or off. You can also turn off the generation of neutral files. So if you're saving a lot of things on a regular basis, let's say I'm selecting all of these and I want to overwrite all of these files. I don't want it to generate neutral files at the moment. When I say go, because I've got access to those files, we now also have a save progress window. And the save progress window means I know exactly what's happening and I know it's working, instead of just seeing a blue torus on the screen and wondering what's going on. So much more visual for the user to understand what's happening. Now, that whole save took 2 minutes and 41 seconds because I did a lot of talking. Anybody who knows me knows that's what I do. I talk a lot. So, right. I'm going to do exactly the same save again, 2 minutes and 41, but this time I'm just going to say save all of that, overwrite and go, and we'll see how long the save takes this time. So it's saving every single one of those files and all of the related drawings. So it's loading each one of those drawings and saving it, and the whole thing did it in 16.5 seconds. So much faster loading, much more visual when you're saving, progress to understand what's happening during the save, and based on our tests on all of the sample assemblies that we used, it's typically 10 times faster than the previous version. Okay, so a massive change to the tool. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are individual videos that go into a bit more detail on all of these topics. I can't go into all of the detail today because we don't really have the time. Okay, so a really good new single load and save window for SolidWorks. When I'm finished working, I'm actually going to do something here. If I open this part in its own window, and I do a local save as if I've changed that part, what I'm also going to do is create a new part, okay, and I'm just going to say feature buff, going to be the typical disk, something not particularly exciting. So I've created a part, okay, I've saved it locally, but I've not saved it to DDM. And I'm going to close it. Okay. I'm also going to close my assembly. If I go to clear my working folder now, it's now intelligent. Instead of just saying, do you want to close it, yes or no? And if you say yes, it will delete everything from your working folder. It's now telling me that all of the green files are up to date on the server. This file is not known to the server, and this file has been modified locally. And from here, I could say, well, reopen that because I now want to save it to DDM, or reopen the one that's not been saved. So we can basically make it fail safe to warn the user if you haven't saved correctly to the database before you remove it from your local computer. So much more intelligent and much more visual. Okay. Clear the working folder. I'm going to ignore that because if I do clear that, we have an option to save the deleted data for a number of days or an amount of disk space, and then you can access those files in the background. So if you inadvertently do delete something, you can always recover it for an amount of time that is set by yourselves. Okay, next enhancement. Neutral files, automatic PDF DXF of a specific sheet for SolidWorks. I've got an example in here. I'm just going to hop into DDM and I'm going to look for this number. So this is a sheet metal item. Okay. If I load the part, I'll load it into DDM. I should have taken the option say auto close now. In here, go and get me the related drawing. Now this drawing has got multiple sheets. Sheet 1 is a detailed drawing where you'd have all of your dimensions. Sheet 2 is just the profile of this sheet metal part. On our DDM menu, we have a neutral files option. And if we choose neutral files option, I can say I want PDF and DXF. But on sheet 1, I only want the PDF. On sheet 2, I want the DXF. So you can choose which sheets you want the different formats for your neutral file generation. And I say OK. So I save that away. It will do that for me. And now that I've defined that, whenever I load and save this drawing, it will always do the right thing. Okay. If I look in the properties of this drawing now, on the attachments, I've got a DXF, and that DXF will only be for the sheet 2, not the sheet 1, and the PDF will only be for sheet 1, not for sheet 2. So this enhancement, which is 11275, is the ability to have DXF and PDFs for specific sheet numbers. There's e-drawings showing me my DXF profile that I've saved away. Okay. Now, The next enhancement, again for SolidWorks, is neutral files flat pattern DXF of the sheet part itself. Okay, so I've got this part here, which clearly is a sheet metal part. Now, at the moment, this is only for SolidWorks and SolidEdge. As we do the single save options for the other CAD applications, we will look to see whether the CAD application has the ability to do this kind of thing, and then we will build it in. Now, if I have an option here that says mark as sheet metal, so on my menu here, I can say this is a sheet metal part. If I look at the properties here, in my attachments, I've got a DXF. If I remove that, okay, then when I save this file, so I'm going to use my new single save, okay, I'll switch on my neutral file generation, and it will now save that part. Okay, again, we get the status. So we know what's happening. It loaded the drawing in the background to update the drawing, and it's created. And if I scroll down in here, we can see that it's generated a flat pattern of the DXF 2 of 2. Okay, I close that and go back into the properties. Against my attachments, I've got a DXF, not from the drawing, straight from the model. So again, I'm going to open eDrawings. It seems to take a minute to do this. And there is my flat pattern profile of the sheet metal part as opposed to the drawing. Okay, next enhancement is we also have the ability for the action server to do this as well. So what we have with DDM is something called an action server, which gives you the ability to generate neutral file formats in the background on a different machine. Okay. At an admin level, I've got under CAD and neutral files, my action server has been configured for SolidWorks to automatically create a 3D flat pattern DXF of sheet metal parts. Now the sheet metal file, must have an existing flat pattern view against it. Okay, that's now switched on. If I just look in here and say quantity to progress, there's 23 files that need to be updated by my action server. So I'm just going to switch that on to clear the 23 files. Then what I'm going to do is remove the DXF from this sheet metal part and then run this tool again. So my action client has identified 23 files in the database that don't have the correct neutral attachments. Okay, and if anybody's not using this at the moment and is interested, again, contact your sales guys. There's no extra software to do this. It's just a configuration issue. So, and if I minimize DDM, you'll see that in the background, it's generating all those neutral files for me. Finished. There's a few Inventor files that need to be done as well. So let's just let that ripple through as well. Okay, so that is now finished. If I go to my sheet metal part here, I have an attachment for the DXF of the sheet metal part. If I remove that, okay, this enhancement is the ability for the action client to generate that part for me. So it's looking at the database now. You can see it's running, and it's going to identify anything that doesn't have the correct neutral file formats, and then it's found it. It will load that into SolidWorks. There's the sheet metal part. It will create the DXF of the flat pattern and save it to the database. If I close that out, go back into here and reselect it, we now have our DXF automatically generated. So next option is DDMC 11199 toolbox support. We've been asked many times over the years for support of the toolbox. I've got an option in here. I have some examples that I've been generating for demonstration in here. So this assembly contains some toolbox items. I'm going to load it into SolidWorks. So it's going to open SolidWorks for me. So this assembly, okay, I'm going to activate my toolbox. Come on. And I'm going to go in and add, let's say, I don't know, a chain wheel, double pitch conveyor. Like, if I just bring this in. Okay, I'm going to take the default, which is the 208A. So I've just added this from the toolbox. And you see here inside our assembly, it's recognized as a toolbox item. When we save this to DDM now, we convert that from a toolbox item to a non-toolbox item. And because the save window has recognized the fact that we have a toolbox item in our structure, what it's asking me is, do you want to check the database to see if you've already got this part inside DDM, because we don't want to create duplicate parts. So I'll say, yes, go and find out. Well, there are none of them in DDM of this item. So what we will do now, and you'll see in the single save window, it's highlighting the fields that we need to fill in when we carry out our save. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to give it a part number. Okay, I'm going to leave the description. I'm going to drop it into a category. I'm just going to put it in a temporary category for now. And I want to reserve this into my, let's say, pinned folders, to my testing samples folder. So I'm making all of my decisions on my save, again in the new single save window. We save this away, and you can see now in my structure, this part is no longer recognized as a toolbox part. If either the same user or a different user goes in and brings something from the toolbox again into our structure, when I now do a save, again we'll get the same prompt. Do you want to check DDM? Yes, I do. We've already got this item in the DDM database. Even though it's now under another number, it's the same item. So now what we've got in our structure is the addition of this item, but we're not duplicating it under a new part number. So really nice, neat way of supporting the SolidWorks toolbox capability. Okay. Now, the next one is a tool that clearly this is just for SolidWorks users. If you have parts in your database that are still recognized as toolbox parts, and you want to convert them to non-toolbox parts, we now have a tool available. If I go to this location, in fact, in the admin tool, under CAD settings for SolidWorks, we can launch the SolidWorks file version updater or the toolbox updater. So I can now launch this tool, and this can basically scan my entire database, check the toolbox. There's 3,234 files that are potentially SolidWorks toolbox parts. So I can scan the entire database and I can convert them en masse to non-toolbox parts. So anyone who does use the toolbox understands that it can be a bit tricky at times and cause problems. This is a real nice way of making a few simple rules and updating all of your data. So I'm going to have to let this run out. And while that's running, I'm going to look at the next topic in my list. Yeah. Yes, okay. So it's found one toolbox part in my entire database. When I first ran this, there was hundreds of them. But clearly, I've run this a number of times. And typically, it's a one-time exercise, because once you've done it, the saving takes care of it every time now. Okay, there's one item. Okay, this is the item 35054. Do I want to convert it? Yes, I do. Finished. Done. So, nice tool, simple process. The next enhancement is for SolidWorks. It's 11329, and it's the ability to specify the name of a configuration to be always ignored when you're saving configurations. If I go to copy, I'm going to go to DDM. I'm going to find this. So, if I load this, close after loading automatically, because I've explained this so we don't need it left on the screen. This part has got a number of configurations, and this is for parts and or assemblies. There is typically a default configuration, and we don't want this to be saved as an individual part within DDM. Okay. At an admin level, under CAD and neutral files, CAD settings for SolidWorks, we can say ignore these configuration names. And what we've put in here by default are all of the different languages for configuration names. You see, I've already also added down there the name Joe. Okay, and that means if I was to add a new configuration and I call it Joe, so it might be that this particular configuration is just positional or, you know, not to be an assembly or a part. So I've created a new configuration. When I go to DDM now and I go to save, it analyzes it, it gives me my data, and the only things that are going to be saved are the actual configurations that I want saving. If I say show ignored members of the family table, I can also see in here the default and Joe that are permanently ignored. Okay, so just helps you when you're managing SolidWorks assembly and part configurations relative to whatever your particular use case is. We will be applying these rules to Creo in the future as well, because Creo has family tables. So we'll be doing the same thing for Creo family tables, just not at the moment. Okay, now in addition to this, so that's the first one, you can specify the default names to be ignored. What you can also do is the next enhancement down, which is 11331, is the ability to say, well, actually, I want to set this and say permanently ignore this one. So even though it's got a different name other than the defaults, I could say permanently ignore this and it won't try and save it every time. So again, just giving you more options on how you want to manage SolidWorks part and assembly configurations. Okay, and as I said earlier, there are videos showing you all of these things on the new release. I'm going to cancel out of there. So I'm going to close this because the next one is the SolidWorks single save window. I'm going to do it very quickly because it's very similar, if not identical, to the SolidWorks one. If I hop back into DDM, I have an assembly now. If I go and look for this assembly, okay, I found too many of them, so I'm going to go in and look specifically across assemblies, like so. And I've got this assembly that was sent to me by a customer to play around with, basically. When I open it, this is made up out of 96 files. You'll see now we're getting a number of batches. It's not one batch, it's loading them in chunks. Okay, and we can see how many files in each different batch. Okay, it's now launching it into SolidEdge. I can close SolidWorks in the background. SolidEdge was not already open, so we've broken that hard link between DDM and the CAD application. Okay, it's just opening SolidEdge in the background for me. And when it's finished the load, it closes the load window. Okay. So that's quite a big assembly. There's 179 parts in this assembly. If I close this assembly, and again, we've got the clear working folder now, the much more intelligent clear working folder. He says confidently, there you go, clear the working folder. If I open the same assembly again and I say don't close after load, it's pretty quick. It's not having to open SolidEdge this time. So that whole load took 5.8 seconds for a 179 part assembly. Okay, again, just like with SolidWorks, we've got a single save option, save copy as, neutral file options, load related drawing. The single save, just like we did on the other one, gives us the ability to visually see what we're looking at in terms of the structure and therefore make decisions on what we want to be changing. I might want to overwrite the top level assembly, and it might be that I'm working on this part and that, but I want to create these as new items. And you see I've just cleared the part numbers. I want to give this one an automatic number, and I want the drawing to inherit the number from the parent. Lots of nice little options in here. Okay, I want to reserve, and now it's going to update, save my assembly, but with those two new items in, that, well, the item and the drawing under a new number. So much easier to understand what you're doing and make these decisions, and it's now creating the neutral files and doing all of that work for me. So typically about 10 times quicker than the previous save. It's obviously gone on a slow now. I've said 10 times quicker. So let's just let this finish out. Yeah, it's generating the neutral files and recreating the new drawings under the new numbers. So I can see that it's working. That's one of the biggest benefits, is the user knows what's happening. For anybody who works on a wide area network, we also have a background file uploader. If I minimize this window, what we have running in the background, the save is finished, but this background file uploader could be still saving the files to the server, but the user can carry on working without having to wait. So if you're working on a remote network, it's as quick as working in the office. So all of the things that I showed you with the SolidWorks single save apply to this SolidEdge single save. Faster loading, intelligent caching, much more visual saving, much faster, and with the intelligent clear working folder. I'm going to go to, again, if I close, clear the working folder, I know it's safe to do so because everything is green and I know I'm not running any risks. If I hop back into the database, I have now got a part in here. Okay, this is for SolidEdge. Didn't find it because it's a part, not an assembly. Let me just go into here like this and search for my part. This part is a sheet metal part. Okay, here it's got a DXF attached because it's a sheet metal part. If I remove that and I load the part, let's clear this window when it's loaded. So I'm loading the part. In the DDM menu, when I say save, I've got neutral files switched on up in the top here. When I save this part, if there is a flattened pattern against it, it will create that DXF pattern for me. So let's see what's happening at the moment. This is all of the things, they're creating DXF file. Okay, that's on the drawing, creating the step file, and then what it should have done is it should have, if I open the properties of the part, in the attachments, it's created the DXF of the flat profile as well. So again, very, very quick and very useful. So the next one is neutral files on the action server. Again, this is 9907. If I close this part out and I go back into DDM, if I clear the working folder, hop back into DDM. Against this part, if I clear that DXF and remove it on my server for CAD neutral files, we've got it set on save for SolidEdge. We want the flat pattern, but you can also do it on the action server. Sorry, scroll. We want the 3D flat pattern for the DXF. Okay, and therefore I've removed it. If I run my action client, it will go and regenerate that for me in the background automatically. There we go. Okay, close that, go to DDM. This part now has its DXF of the flat pattern profile. The next enhancement is support. This is now for Autodesk's Inventor. We have now got support for presentation files. I've got an example here. I'm going to start Inventor. So we've started Inventor. I'm going to say search and open, and I'm now looking for an assembly. This is my assembly. Okay, I believe it is. Add a second presentation, save to DDM. So this assembly, I've got edit permission on it. It's work in progress. I've got it reserved. If I launch this into Inventor, in Inventor you can create presentation files. So this is my assembly, and I want to create a new presentation for this assembly. This is the assembly that I want, so we say open. I'm just going to say presentation, tweak components. I'm going to move this out like that, move it up, move it back, and then this item here, I'm going to move it out, move it up, out a little bit more, and say OK. I've created a presentation file. If we watch it, it's just the ability to animate exploding things, etc. And what we've done in DDM now is allowed you to save that presentation file against the assembly. Okay, so PDM menu, save my presentation file. It's going to create it as a new item. It's against this assembly, so I'm going to copy the number. I'm going to give it a manual number, and I'm going to call this -IPN2. Okay, I'm going to drop it into a category. I've got a special category, Inventor presentation files. Add it to that category. When I save it, I'm going to reserve it to my project, and we've now saved that away. If I come out of Inventor and close my assembly, clear the working folder, that's the old style, and go back into here. If I refresh the screen, I now have a presentation and a presentation 2 file for that assembly. And if I say were used, because the presentation file is the parent, we can see that that assembly is related to 2 different presentation files. If you load a presentation file, it knows to load the assembly because it needs it in order to run the animation. So support for presentation files within Autodesk Inventor. The next enhancement is Inventor neutral files on the action server. We've added a lot of new neutral file options in here. If I go in here and search for this part, okay, I've got a step file against this part. If I remove the step file against the part, in the DDM administration tool under save here, we can generate all of these formats on user save, and we can also generate all of these formats using the action server. You can see I've got step files turned on, and if I say quantity to progress, there's one file in my database that doesn't have a step file, and therefore if I open my action client, minimize DDM, we will see it generate that step file for us. So it's going to generate the step file. Okay, all finished. Go back into DDM, reselect the part. We now have a step file against it. So adding lots of neutral file generation capabilities for Autodesk Inventor. The next enhancement is to support iParts within Inventor. I've got an example in here. So I've got in here this particular part. Now it's just a square hollow section, and at the moment if I look in the family table tab, so for anyone who's not seen the 2023.03 version of DDM, instead of having to open the properties in its own window, we can see the properties in the bottom window, and we now have a family table tab. So if you're using Creo or SolidWorks for family tables, or now Inventor, we can see those relationships in this window, which is quite useful. Now, as we can see here, we've got a 60, a 70 and an 80 length of this square hollow section. Okay, I need to call this from Inventor because this has not been rewritten yet. So I will go into Autodesk Inventor and I will use my search and open. I'm going to open my part into Inventor. Okay, and I go to Manage iParts. We can see in our table here we've got a 60, 70 and an 80 length. I want to add a new iPart, insert row. So it's just like family tables or configurations. This will be a 90 version. Okay, I'm going to make the length 90. Okay, I'm going to change my description in here and say this one is 90 long. Okay, and I'm going to clear the ELUID and say OK. We now have a save iPart table, save family table for Inventor. If I save it, it should recognize that there is a new member of the family table, and it will give me the option to save that to DDM. This is my 90 version. I'm going to drop it into a category. In here I've got a category for iParts. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to reserve this to my test project. It will save it away. All saved away. If I close it from here, clear the working folder, pop back into DDM, refresh the screen, this part now has for 4 members of the family table, including the new 90mm long version. So support for Inventor iParts within DDM. The next enhancement is the Autodesk Inventor frame generator. I've got a sample in my database here. Okay, and this is a frame. It's actually an assembly, and my assembly at the moment contains my wireframe that I'm going to build my steel frame from. I'm going to load this assembly. Okay, and instead of using my template assembly, the first thing I'm going to do is save this as a new assembly. I don't need to save the child element. What I'm going to do is say this is my, I'll call this frame workshop 240925. So this is my new assembly. I'm going to drop it into my frame builder category, and I'm going to reserve it to my project. Okay, now the new enhancement is I can now go and start using the Inventor frame generator. You choose what your material is. This is all standard Inventor, and as you can see, what I can do now is start to build my framework. Okay, I'm just going to add 3 of the members here. There's also tools in here to decide what kind of joints you want, V joints, butt joints, all of that good stuff. All I've done is created myself this new welded assembly. Now, I'm not going to tidy this up by doing all the joints and things. Let's just keep it simple for now. Okay, and if I say fit, when I now go to the database and say I want to save my assembly, I start to save the new members one by one. I'm going to drop it into the correct category and reserve it to my project, and it's just going to work its way through, saving them one at a time. Frame builder, okay. This project, okay, again. Now in the future, when we've rewritten the Inventor interface as a single save window, you'll be able to make all of these decisions in one go. This is the frame itself, and I'm going to reserve that to my project. Everything has been saved. Okay, it didn't need to save the skeleton because that hasn't changed. So if I exit out of here, clear my working folder, go back into DDM, if I refresh my screen, it's not going to find that, so I need to find this. I've got some samples in here for Inventor Frame Builder, and we can now see in here we've got our workshop assembly, and the workshop assembly contains the skeleton frame, our new assembly that contains the 3 sections of that frame. So DDMC 1574 for Inventor is the support of the Inventor Frame Builder tool. Okay, I'm going to clear my screen. The final enhancement is actually for IronCAD. I'm going to close Inventor. Okay, and if I go to IronCAD now, oh, here we go, IronCAD. So search and open, we can have our own dedicated menu ribbon bar inside IronCAD. So DDM enhancement DDMC 10077 now gives us the ability to have our own. I'm going to go manufactured mechanical bearing housing assembly, and if I go into my standards here, I'll say latest issue only, and in here I've got an IronCAD assembly. When I load my IronCAD assembly, we can see now that I have my own dedicated DDM menu. So if I go to here, just like with the other applications, we've got our own DDM menu inside IronCAD. Now, we've seen the single save window for SolidWorks. We've seen the single save window for SolidEdge and the loading and the clearing working folder. We're currently working on the IronCAD version of that, so that will be the next one to be released. I'd like to say before Christmas, but we can't guarantee it. When we finish the IronCAD one, we're going to then work on the Inventor one. When the Inventor one is finished, we're going to rewrite the Creo one, because the Creo was the one that led the way and started with a single save window. We've also enhanced it, so you will see changes in it. But we are working through improving all of those in terms of loading, caching, visually saving information and clearing the working folder. So it's 3:50 local time, and we've managed to cover 40 enhancements in just under 2 hours, so just under 4 minutes per enhancement, which is amazing for me because I talk too much. Thank you all.